What if the most chilling spy films of Britain were not fantasy, but field manuals in disguise? Imagine cigarette smoke curling in dim rooms where loyalty was just another code word. These were stories of men and women who traded truth for survival. In the Cold War's shadow, Britain's cinema revealed more than it meant to. These thrillers did not just entertain, they exposed the real game. Number 12. The Spy Who Came In from the Cold, 1965. When this film hit theaters, it shattered every illusion of glamorous espionage. Gone were the tuxedos and martinis. What audiences saw instead was damp Berlin streets and souls drenched in betrayal. Based on John le Carré's novel, it followed Alec Leamas, a burned-out British agent sent back behind the Iron Curtain to pose as a defector. But what seemed like a mission soon twisted into a cruel labyrinth of deception. Unlike Bond, this spy did not win. He decayed. The gray cinematography mirrored a world where morality was an obsolete relic. Western intelligence and Eastern Bloc alike were shown as indistinguishable in their manipulation and cold cruelty. Censors worried it was too bleak, too anti-establishment. Some government circles even whispered that it hurt British prestige at a time when real agents were being swapped at Checkpoint Charlie. Richard Burton's performance was so raw that critics wondered if it mirrored real MI6 disillusionment. Behind the scenes, producers fought studio pressure to soften the ending. They refused. The result was a masterpiece of resignation that felt like a classified confession. Today, the film endures as the most accurate portrayal of espionage as tradecraft, not adventure. No gadgets, only lies. No heroes, only ghosts. It remains a grim mirror of how the Cold War truly operated. In the end, Liamas falls not for ideology, but exhaustion. A man crushed between two systems, both pretending to be righteous. Number 11. The Deadly Affair, 1966. This understated thriller slipped quietly into theaters, yet its subtlety was lethal. Adapted from le Carré's Call for the Dead, it introduced audiences to Charles Dobbs, the weary intelligence officer who would later evolve into George Smiley. What begins as an apparent suicide spirals into a murder, entangled with espionage betrayal and moral rot within the British establishment itself. Shot through fog, tinted lenses by cinematographer Freddie Young, the film turned London into a haunted landscape of whispered phone calls and rain-streaked secrets. James Mason's performance captured the exhausted professionalism of real spies, those who operated not for glory, but because they knew too much to stop. Censors barely blinked, yet Whitehall was uneasy. The script's portrayal of corruption within British intelligence hit close to home. Some claimed certain scenes were inspired by the real-life Philby affair, where betrayal came not from Moscow, but from the heart of MI6. Behind the camera director, Sidney Lumet faced studio frustration for keeping the film's pacing deliberate and quiet. But that restraint became its weapon. No explosions, only silences that accused the audience. The film's realism reflected genuine tradecraft surveillance, without spectacle-coded messages written in boredom and dread. Its legacy grew in whispers. Later, critics rediscovered it as a key transitional film between the romantic heroics of early spy cinema and the moral exhaustion that defined le Carré's universe. The Deadly Affair remains a portrait of espionage as domestic tragedy, spying not as battle between nations, but between husbands and wives, between loyalty and conscience. Every shadow hides a file. Every silence hides a betrayal. Number 10. The Ipcress File, 1965. If James Bond represented elite power, Harry Palmer was the working-class counter-spy. The Ipcress File stripped the profession of privilege and revealed the bureaucracy beneath. Michael Caine's bespectacled intelligence officer was underpaid, overworked, and expendable. The story follows him as he uncovers a mind control conspiracy targeting British scientists and threatening to erase free will itself. The tone was cynical, wry, and grounded. Offices replaced casinos. Coffee replaced champagne. Every decision felt surveilled by invisible superiors. The realism struck a nerve because it mirrored how Cold War intelligence really functioned, through endless paperwork deception and human frailty. Some viewers thought the hypnosis scenes flirted too closely with real experimental programs. Decades later, historians confirmed eerie parallels to declassified British and American psychological operations. Behind the scenes, director Sidney J. Furie fought producers over the film's handheld visual style. The tilted angles and claustrophobic framing mimicked how spies truly saw the world, through cracks, keyholes, and half-truths. Studio executives wanted glamour. Furie wanted truth. He won. The public adored it. Critics praised its authenticity. Intelligence veterans quietly nodded. The film even inspired real training lectures on counterintelligence awareness. Its legacy is immense. Without the Ipcress File, there would be no Bourne, no Tinker Tailor, no distrust of the establishment. It captured tradecraft in its purest form, the illusion of control within chaos. By the final scene, when Palmer realizes he has been both pawn and player, the Cold War itself becomes the true villain. In a world where knowledge was currency, the Ipcress File showed that memory itself could be weaponized. Number 9. The Quiller Memorandum, 1966. When the Quiller Memorandum arrived, it offered a spy story without illusions. No gadgets, no glory, only a man walking alone through post-war Berlin, hunted by enemies he could not see. George Siegel's Quiller was not suave. He was methodical, quiet, and utterly human. His mission was to infiltrate a new Nazi organization secretly rising beneath the ashes of peace. The film's tone was deliberate and unnerving. Every street corner felt like a trap, every conversation a coded warning. Screenwriter Harold Pinter injected his signature menace into each silence, making dialogue feel like interrogation. When Quiller and his adversary played verbal chess, it was not about information, but survival. Audiences expecting Bond-style fireworks were shocked. Critics called it cold, cerebral, and unrelenting. But intelligence professionals whispered admiration. They recognized its accuracy in depicting psychological manipulation as a weapon more potent than bullets. The film's use of surveillance, counter-surveillance, and isolation mirrored authentic field operations used during the Cold War's quietest battles. There were murmurs that British officials disliked its moral ambiguity. The idea of Western agencies manipulating ex-Nazis to fight communism hit uncomfortably close to reality. Several reviewers later hinted that the film's story echoed real secret programs where ex-fascists were indeed repurposed as assets. Behind the scenes, producer Ivan Foxwell clashed with studios over its ending. Pinter refused to include triumph. He insisted on moral exhaustion instead. That defiance gave the film its enduring bite. Today, the Quiller Memorandum stands as an unsung masterpiece, a study in tension where heroism dissolves into existential dread. It reminds viewers that true espionage is not about saving nations, but surviving lies. Every step Quiller takes feels like walking through history's graveyard. Number 8. The Human Factor, 1979. By the late 70s, the spy genre was worn thin. Then, the human factor arrived and stripped it to the bone. Directed by Otto Preminger in his final film, it portrayed espionage not as spectacle, but as slow decay. Nicol Williamson's performance as Maurice Castle, a mild-mannered British officer secretly passing intelligence to the Soviets for love, not ideology, remains hauntingly real. The film's realism unnerved critics. Instead of assassins, it gave paperwork. Instead of gunfights, it gave moral paralysis. Viewers were forced to sit inside the mind of a man torn between duty and devotion. The story was inspired by Graham Greene's novel itself, drawn from real betrayals inside MI6 during the Philby era. Censors hesitated. Its depiction of British intelligence as paranoid and self-devouring clashed with national pride. The film's suggestion that loyalty could coexist with treason was seen as dangerous. Some even speculated that the release was quietly delayed to avoid official embarrassment. Behind the scenes, Preminger clashed with financiers over tone and pacing. He refused to stylize the story. The sets were plain, the offices cramped, the lighting harshly real. The director reportedly consulted former operatives to ensure tradecraft accuracy, from how files were handled to how dead drops were executed. Audiences did not flock to see it, but decades later, intelligence historians hailed it as one of cinema's most honest depictions of internal espionage. The film captured the slow rot of secrecy and how even love could become an instrument of control. The human factor endures as a meditation on guilt and the quiet loneliness of double lives. It showed that sometimes the greatest betrayals begin with compassion. Number 7. The Fourth Protocol, 1987. When the Fourth Protocol premiered, it reignited Cold War paranoia. Based on Frederick Forsyth's novel, it envisioned a terrifying scenario: a rogue Soviet plan to detonate a nuclear bomb near an American base in Britain to trigger political collapse without open war. Michael Caine returned to familiar ground as John Preston, a sharp yet defiant British operative who discovers the plot through fragments of coded messages. Opposite him, Pierce Brosnan played a silent Soviet agent who weaponized patience as lethally as any gun. The film's tension came from precision. The story unfolded through genuine operational steps: document forgery, microfilm drops, coded phone calls, and counterintelligence bureaucracy. Real agents later admitted the procedures were uncomfortably authentic. Forsyth's deep connections within military intelligence likely provided those details. Its release rattled both sides. Soviet diplomats condemned it as Western propaganda, while some British officials whispered that the scenario mirrored classified contingency fears of nuclear sabotage. Scenes showing unauthorized surveillance of British citizens caused parliamentary unease. Behind the scenes, the production faced its own espionage irony. Certain filming locations were denied by government authorities, forcing the crew to recreate military sites in secret. Caine's portrayal of an agent fighting not enemies, but superiors struck home with audiences who had grown cynical about authority. The Fourth Protocol became a late-era Cold War classic. It proved that spy cinema could still reveal hard truths about deterrence and distrust. Forsyth's story suggested that the greatest danger was not the bomb, but the bureaucracy meant to stop it. In its final moments, the silence before the explosion becomes more terrifying than the explosion itself. Because silence was always the real weapon of the Cold War. Number 6. The Looking Glass War, 1969. When The Looking Glass War premiered, audiences expecting another Le Carré thriller were stunned by its brutal honesty. There were no glamorous agents or explosive missions, only bureaucrats orchestrating disaster. The film followed a failed British operation to send an untrained civilian spy into East Germany on a reckless intelligence mission. What begins as patriotism collapses into hopeless futility. Christopher Jones played the doomed recruit, and Anthony Hopkins portrayed the weary handler haunted by the ghosts of past operations. Their exchanges dripped with quiet dread. Every order sounded like a death sentence disguised as duty. The film exposed the machinery of espionage not as heroism, but human sacrifice. Critics found it depressing. The government found it uncomfortable. British censors hesitated over scenes showing MI6's incompetence and disregard for human life. Some suspected the script drew too directly from classified blunders in the early Cold War, where untrained civilians were indeed sent behind the Iron Curtain and never returned. Behind the camera, production was chaotic. Director Frank Pearson insisted on filming in authentic European locations, mirroring the bleak desolation of real surveillance zones. Funding was constantly threatened due to its pessimistic tone. Studio executives demanded rewrites to inject action. Pearson refused, saying real Tradecraft was not about shooting, but waiting. When released, it performed poorly, but years later, intelligence historians would call it prophetic. It revealed that even victory in espionage often came at the price of conscience. Today, The Looking Glass War is remembered not as entertainment, but as evidence. It demonstrated that spycraft is not about courage, but obedience. Every mission is a mirror, and every mirror reflects regret. Number 5. Defense of the Realm, 1985. Defense of the Realm turned journalism into espionage. It was a thriller about a reporter who uncovers a government cover-up involving national security surveillance and the silencing of truth. Gabriel Byrne played Nick Mullen, a cynical journalist who stumbles onto evidence of illegal operations orchestrated by the state. The deeper he digs, the more he becomes the target. The film captured the late Cold War paranoia that the enemy might be within. Instead of foreign spies, it portrayed domestic corruption, the merging of intelligence agencies, and political manipulation. The newsroom becomes an intelligence cell, the typewriter a weapon. Critics praised its authenticity. Many of the surveillance details and methods of information control mirrored actual British scandals of the period. Its release coincided with real revelations about media censorship and covert propaganda campaigns. Viewers could not tell where fiction ended and reality began. Censors did not ban it, but rumors spread that certain government departments quietly pressured networks to limit promotion. The script's fearless depiction of political hypocrisy struck nerves in Parliament. Some journalists later confirmed that key plot points mirrored operations they had been warned never to report. Behind the scenes, director David Drury shot London like a surveillance labyrinth. Cameras lingered on reflections in glass corridors. Every frame felt watched. Gabriel Byrne and Denholm Elliott delivered performances steeped in exhaustion, not adrenaline. Over time, Defense of the Realm aged like prophecy. It predicted the surveillance anxieties of modern Britain long before they were public. Its realism in depicting manipulation of truth remains chilling. In the end, it is not a story about spies. It is a story about the citizens they spy upon. Number 4. The Russia House, 1990. As the Iron Curtain trembled, the world saw The Russia House. Based on another Le Carré novel, it was a story not of espionage's glory, but its slow death. Sean Connery played Barley Blair, a British publisher caught between East and West when a mysterious manuscript exposes Soviet nuclear weaknesses. Michelle Pfeiffer portrayed Katya, a Russian woman, risking everything to pass him the truth. The film felt eerily real because it arrived during the final collapse of the Soviet Union. Its dialogue was drawn from genuine tradecraft exchanges recorded by double agents and diplomatic channels. The recruitment scenes reflected real methods of soft infiltration, using art culture and love as tools of persuasion. Governments did not censor it, but intelligence insiders reportedly found it uncomfortable. The film suggested that by the end of the Cold War, the intelligence game was no longer about ideology, but about inertia, agencies spying out of habit, not necessity. Behind the scenes, production gained rare access to Moscow and St. Petersburg during Perestroika. Many scenes were filmed in locations previously forbidden to Western crews. Extras included real former Soviet security personnel. The authenticity was so striking that audiences felt they were watching documentary footage rather than fiction. Connery's performance humanized the spy as poet, philosopher, and skeptic. He was not fighting communism. He was fighting loneliness. The tone was melancholic rather than thrilling. Critics called it a requiem for the Cold War. Viewers sensed the exhaustion of both sides. It stands as one of cinema's most humane depictions of espionage, not as power, but as communication across impossible walls. The Russia House remains timeless because it showed that in the end, intelligence was not about winning, but understanding. Number 3. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, 1979. Before espionage became a cinematic spectacle, it was a quiet chess match played by men who no longer believed in victory. The BBC's adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was not a film of car chases or explosions, but of whispers that could destroy governments. It starred Alec Guinness as George Smiley, the calm and weary intelligence officer drawn out of forced retirement to hunt a traitor embedded deep within the British Secret Service. From its first moment, it felt too real to be fiction. Offices looked dusty, not glamorous. Spies were middle-aged bureaucrats burdened by guilt, not martinis. The dialogue was cryptic, coded, and cold. Audiences found themselves eavesdropping on real tradecraft, where even silence carried meaning. The story mirrored actual scandals that had shaken Britain. The Cambridge Five had only recently been exposed. Their betrayal echoed in every line of Le Carré's script. The public realized this was not fantasy. These events had already happened. There was real fear that certain dialogue drew upon authentic interrogation transcripts. Censors did not intervene, yet Whitehall quietly frowned upon it. Certain ex-operatives grumbled that it revealed far too much about real recruitment tactics and psychological profiling. Even Alec Guinness reportedly met with former intelligence men who warned that his portrayal was uncomfortably accurate. Behind the scenes, the production itself became a study in patience. Director John Irvin insisted that tension should come not from movement, but from stillness. The camera lingered on faces until they broke. Every pause, every cigarette, every glance was deliberate. The BBC worried that audiences would not sit through such subtlety. They were wrong. Viewers were hypnotized. When it aired, it became a national event. Ratings soared. Critics hailed it as the definitive espionage story. For intelligence professionals, it became a secret manual on behavioral surveillance and counterintelligence psychology. Decades later, the series remains unmatched in authenticity. It captured espionage as spiritual corrosion, where truth and loyalty dissolve into gray. Smiley's quiet triumph is not victory, but survival. His haunted eyes became the eyes of an entire generation that had learned to mistrust everyone, including itself. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy endures as the purest distillation of real tradecraft on screen. No music, no glamour, only truth and silence. Number 2. The Whistleblower, 1986. When The Whistleblower premiered, Britain was still reeling from espionage scandals that had shredded public trust. This was not a spy thriller about saving the world, it was about losing faith in it. Starring Michael Caine as Frank Jones, a quiet translator for the Ministry of Defense, the story begins with tragedy. His son, an intelligence analyst, dies suddenly in what's ruled a suicide. But the father suspects otherwise, and as he searches for the truth, he uncovers a web of surveillance, betrayal, and moral rot inside the very agencies sworn to protect the nation. What made the film so disturbing was its plausibility. Its depiction of phone taps, double agents, and bureaucratic coldness mirrored the climate of Thatcher-era secrecy and the real-life fallouts from the Jeffrey Prime and Michael Bettany spy cases. Intelligence veterans privately admitted the script felt uncomfortably close to home. Caine's subdued performance transformed the genre, no martinis, no gadgets, just grief turned into investigation. Every scene drips with the slow terror of realization that, in modern espionage, the state can erase anyone who asks the wrong question. Behind the camera, director Simon Langton insisted on documentary-level accuracy, consulting former civil servants on how files were handled, how accidents were arranged, and how internal inquests were controlled. Censors hesitated over the implication that British intelligence might murder its own citizens to preserve secrets, but public pressure forced its release. The Whistleblower endures as one of the bleakest and most truthful portraits of the Cold War's moral corrosion. It showed that the deadliest battles weren't fought across borders, but across desks, that loyalty could be fatal, and silence the only defense left to the living. Number 1. The Day of the Jackal, 1973. Though often remembered as an assassination thriller, The Day of the Jackal is one of the most realistic depictions of operational tradecraft ever filmed. Directed by Fred Zinnemann, and based on Frederick Forsyth's meticulous novel, it follows an unnamed professional assassin hired by a secret French paramilitary group to kill President Charles de Gaulle. The film's genius lay in its procedural detail. Every step of the operation, from forging passports to constructing a custom rifle to rehearsing escape routes, was portrayed with such precision that real intelligence agencies took notice. After its release, several nations quietly revised internal security protocols because the methods shown were alarmingly accurate. Forsyth himself had drawn on first-hand knowledge from his years as a war correspondent with deep intelligence contacts. Many speculated that the Jackal's preparation sequences mirrored genuine counter-state tradecraft techniques. Nothing in the film was exaggerated. There were no chase scenes, no dramatic speeches, only patience, discipline, and disguise. Censors initially hesitated to approve its release in several countries, including France. Authorities feared it revealed too much about how an assassination could actually be planned and executed. The production even faced restrictions on importing rifle components used for the film's prop weapon. Some governments quietly requested edits to conceal specific procedural steps. Behind the scenes, Zinnemann directed like an intelligence handler. The lead actor, Edward Fox, was forbidden from revealing his character's backstory to preserve total anonymity. Cast and crew received scripts with coded pages. Secrecy was not only theme, but method. Critics praised its precision. Viewers were mesmerized by its absence of emotion. The assassin was professional, efficient, and invisible, the perfect embodiment of real field discipline. No motive, no morality, only mission. Its impact reached beyond cinema. Law enforcement and intelligence trainers later cited The Day of the Jackal as required viewing for understanding surveillance and counter-surveillance awareness. Half a century later, it remains unmatched in authenticity. It captured the chilling truth that in the world of espionage, the most dangerous weapon is not ideology, but competence. The Day of the Jackal ends not with a speech, but with silence. the silence of a world that realizes how easily one invisible man could alter history. These British Cold War thrillers did more than entertain. They documented the unseen war fought in alleys and archives, not battlefields. Each frame carried truth, disguised as fiction. Now that the secrets have surfaced, which of these films revealed the deepest reality to you? Leave your thoughts below and subscribe for more untold stories from the shadows of cinema.